The smell of my sweet potato pie was still on my hands when my son-in-law pointed to the den. Not toward the dining room, where his parents and his sister's family had already settled into the tall-backed chairs, around the table I had spent 3 days cooking for. Not toward any seat with a proper place setting. He pointed to the small folding table tucked in the corner of the den, the kind with plastic legs that wobble if you set anything heavier than a paper plate on it. My granddaughter was already sitting there, picking at the edge of a napkin, looking at the floor. "We ran out of chairs at the main table," he said, smiling the way he always smiled, teeth first, eyes blank. "You don't mind, do you?" I looked at my daughter. She was standing at the kitchen counter, arranging a bread basket. Her back slightly turned, her shoulders held in a way I recognized. That rigid, deliberate stillness that meant she had already agreed to this, before I walked through the door. "Of course not," I said. I carried my casserole dish to the folding table and sat down next to my granddaughter. She reached over and touched my hand once, quickly, then pulled away. She was 17 and already understood things she shouldn't have had to understand yet. From where I sat, I could hear everything in the dining room. My son-in-law's father toasting to the new house, to the new neighborhood, to the family. My daughter laughing at the right moments, her voice bright and careful, tuned to the frequency of people she was still trying to impress. My turkey sat at the center of that table. My cornbread dressing. My green beans slow-cooked since Tuesday morning. My pie cooling on the counter, not yet sliced, waiting for later. None of them asked who made any of it. My granddaughter leaned over at one point and whispered, "Your sweet potato pie smells incredible, Grandma." "Thank you, sweetheart," I said. We ate quietly together in the corner while the real dinner happened 20 feet away. I drove home that night, on the expressway, the lights of other cars streaming past in the dark. My hands stayed steady on the wheel, but something inside me was moving in a different direction. Not rage, not grief. Something more like a long-delayed recognition. The feeling of finally seeing the shape of a thing you have been too close to for too long. I had moved to Naperville the year after my husband passed. My daughter and her husband were already settled in Wheaton by then, 15 minutes away, and she had said it made sense for me to be nearby. At the time, I believed that meant something. That nearby meant present. That present meant included. 35 years as a school nurse had given me more practical sense than sentiment, but grief has a way of softening the edges of what you know. My husband was gone. My daughter was the only family I had left in any direction that mattered. So I moved closer, and I told myself that was enough. What followed was quiet at first. A request here and there. Could I watch the kids during spring break? Could I help with a down payment on a car, just until things settled? There was the kitchen renovation they hadn't planned well for, the unexpected furnace replacement, the private school enrollment fee that came due before the bonus did. I wrote checks with the same steadiness I had once used to fill out medical forms. Matter of fact, uncomplicated, because that was how love was supposed to look, wasn't it? Practical, available, asking nothing back. By the time I pulled into my driveway that Thanksgiving night, I had given them more than I ever added up in my head. I had been careful never to add it up. Adding it up felt like keeping score, and keeping score felt like the opposite of family. The mail was on the kitchen table where I always left it, sorted but unread. I poured myself a glass of water and sat down with it, more out of habit than any real intention of reading. A circular, a bill, A statement from a bank I did not recognize. I almost set it aside. The name on the envelope was mine, but the bank was not one I used. I assumed it was marketing, some offer, some promotion addressed to me by mistake. I opened it anyway. It was a statement for a home equity line of credit in my name. The account had been opened 6 months ago. The credit limit was $80,000. The current balance drawn was $63,412. I read it 3 times. I sat very still. Then I went to my filing cabinet and pulled out every document I had for my property. The deed, the original mortgage paid off 11 years ago, my homeowner's insurance. I spread them across the kitchen table and sat with them until well past midnight, not panicking, just thinking, measuring the distance between what I knew and what the paper in my hand was telling me. I had not opened any home equity account. I had not signed any loan documents. I had not borrowed $63,000. But someone had. I was at the bank before it opened. I sat in my car in the parking lot and watched the lights inside come on one at a time, the way they always do in the morning, like a building slowly waking up. When the doors unlocked, I walked in with the statement in my hand and asked to speak with someone in account services. The woman who helped me had a calm, unhurried manner that I was grateful for. I gave her my identification, my account information, the statement. She typed carefully and looked at her screen for a long moment before she looked at me. "Mrs.," she started. "Just tell me," I said. She turned the screen slightly so I could see. The account had been opened in person, she explained. Someone had come in with identification and signed the loan documents at the branch. She pulled up a scanned image of the signature page. The handwriting on that line was not mine. It was close. Someone had practiced. But I had been signing my name for 67 years, and I knew the way my letters moved. That was not my hand. I felt something settle in my chest, cold and certain. I asked her to freeze the account immediately and to flag it for fraud. I asked for copies of every document. I asked who had accompanied the person who opened the account. She checked. There had been a second individual present, listed as a co-applicant. The name on the co-applicant line was my son-in-law's. I thanked her and asked for the branch manager. We sat in a glass-walled office for the better part of an hour. I gave them everything I had. The manager was methodical and thorough, and at one point he paused and looked at me over his glasses with the quiet gravity of someone delivering news they know will land hard. "I want to mention something else," he said. "About 8 weeks ago, there was an inquiry made through a separate channel. Someone contacted us asking about the process for establishing power of attorney over this account." The room seemed to shift slightly around me. Power of attorney, authority to act in my name, authority to access, to withdraw, to decide. "The inquiry came from an email address associated with your family," he said gently. I nodded once I understood. I left the bank with copies of everything in a folder under my arm and drove directly downtown to the office of the attorney I had used when my husband passed. He was a quiet, careful man who had handled the estate without drama or unnecessary words. He was who I needed. He read through the documents I placed on his desk without interrupting me. When he finished, he set them down and folded his hands. "This is serious," he said. "I know it is. You'll want to contact the fraud division of your local police department, in addition to the bank's own fraud department, and we need to discuss your estate documents." If someone was pursuing power of attorney, your current will and trust arrangements need to be reviewed immediately. I told him to do whatever needed to be done. We worked through the afternoon. I filed a formal fraud report. I updated my will. I established a revocable trust with a professional trustee that could not be altered by anyone but me. Every asset I had, the house, the savings, the pension, the small investment account my husband and I had built together over 40 years, moved into that structure with new protections around it. Every authorization my son-in-law or my daughter may have assumed was quietly, permanently revoked. With each signature I placed on those pages, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Not anger, not victory, just clarity. The particular kind of clarity that comes when you finally stop pretending something isn't happening. My phone began buzzing on the drive home. My daughter 3 times, my son-in-law twice. I let them ring. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I could see my daughter's car already parked along the curb. Both of them were standing on my front porch. My son-in-law had his arms crossed and his jaw set in a way I had learned to recognize as his version of preparation. My daughter stood slightly behind him, her coat pulled tight, her eyes moving between her husband and the front door, like she was calculating something. I got out of my car slowly. I walked up to the porch without hurrying. "We need to talk," my son-in-law said. "Then come inside," I said, and unlocked the door. They followed me into the living room. I set my folder on the side table and sat in the armchair by the window. Neither of them sat down. He started before I could say anything. "The fraud report was a misunderstanding," he said. "There had been a mix-up at the bank. He had been trying to help with some financial planning on my behalf. Things I had mentioned needing help with, and he had perhaps moved forward faster than he should have. But his intentions were to protect me." He said this smoothly, the way people say things they have rehearsed. His voice carried just enough indignation to make it sound like he was the one who had been wronged. I listened without expression. My daughter said nothing. When he finished, I opened the folder and held up the signature page from the loan documents. "This is not my signature," I said. He said, "The bank must have made an error in their records." "The bank has the original," I said, "on file, along with security footage from the branch that day, and a record of the power of attorney inquiry you made 8 weeks ago." For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not remorse, recalculation. "You have no idea how much I've done for this family," he said, his voice dropping to something harder. "All the planning, all the managing. You'd be lost without." "Stop," I said. He stopped, not because he wanted to, because something in the way I said it left no room. "You forged my name on a loan against my home," I said. "That is not planning. That is not managing. That is a crime. And I have reported it as one." My daughter made a sound, small and sharp, like something catching in her throat. My son-in-law's face had gone very still. "You need to leave my house now," I said. He looked at my daughter. She looked at the floor. He picked up his keys from where he had set them on the end table and walked to the door without another word. The sound of it closing behind him was so ordinary, so quiet, compared to everything else in the room. My daughter and I sat in the silence he left behind. After a long moment, I heard the front door open again, softly this time, and my granddaughter stepped into the room. She had her coat half on, like she had been sitting in the car and slipped out when he left. "Grandma," she said. "Come sit with me, sweetheart." She crossed the room and sat on the arm of my chair, something she had done since she was small. I could feel the tension in her, the way she held herself, the breath she took before she spoke. "I have to tell you something," she said. "I've been trying to figure out how to say it." I waited. "I heard Dad on the phone a few weeks ago," she said carefully. "He didn't know I was home. He was talking to someone, I don't know who, and he said—" She stopped, started again. "He said once everything was in order, they could list your house by spring. He said at your age, the equity was the most valuable thing anyway." The words moved through me slowly, the way cold does, reaching everything eventually. My granddaughter's eyes were full, but she held herself steady. She was braver than she should have had to be at 17. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "You did the right thing." My daughter had not moved. She was sitting on the edge of the couch, with her hands pressed flat against her knees, and she was looking at a point somewhere between the coffee table and the floor. Her face had the look of someone who has been moving in a particular direction for a long time, and has only just noticed where the road ends. "How long did you know?" I asked her quietly, not with anger, with something older than anger. She didn't answer right away. "I didn't know about the loan," she said finally. "I swear to you, I didn't know he'd done that." "But you knew other things." A pause. "He told me he was helping you manage things, that you'd agreed to it. I didn't ask questions because it was easier not to." Her voice cracked at the end. "I know how that sounds." It sounded like the truth, the kind that doesn't excuse anything, but at least stops pretending. "Your father and I built this house," I said. "We paid for it together over 30 years. We went without things, real things, so that we could have it free and clear by the time we were old. It was the one thing I was sure of." I looked at her steadily. "Your husband tried to take it while I was sitting at a folding table in the corner of your den, eating Thanksgiving dinner." My daughter put her face in her hands. The sound she made was not a performance. I had raised her. I knew the difference. I did not go to her, not yet. Some things need to be felt all the way through before comfort is useful. My granddaughter watched her mother cry and looked at me, and I gave her a small nod. She slid off the arm of my chair and went to sit beside her mother on the couch. She didn't say anything either. She just put her hand on her mother's back and kept it there. We stayed that way for a long time, the three of us in the living room, while the night settled fully around the house. Eventually, my daughter looked up, her face red, her eyes exhausted. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she said. "I know that's not enough." "No," I said, "it isn't, but it's a start." She left close to 9 o'clock. My granddaughter hugged me at the door for a long moment before following her mother to the car, then turned around at the bottom of the porch steps. "Are you going to be okay tonight?" she asked. "I'm going to be fine," I said. "Are you?" She thought about it honestly, which I always appreciated about her. "I think so," she said. "I think I'm relieved, actually. Is that weird?" "No," I said. "That's wisdom." She smiled, small and tired, and got in the car. I locked the door, turned off the porch light, and stood in my hallway for a moment in the quiet. The house felt different than it had this morning. Not smaller, not emptier. Steadier, somehow. As if it had been holding its breath alongside me, and we could both finally let it go. I washed the few dishes in the sink. I folded the throw blanket over the back of the armchair. I did the small, ordinary things that make a house feel like yours. Before I went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table one more time with a cup of tea and my folder of documents. I looked at the fraud report, the new trust paperwork, the will with my granddaughter's name in it where it had needed to be all along. I read through each page, not with dread, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone who has done what needed doing and done it cleanly. My husband used to say that the most important decisions are the ones you make when you're not afraid. When you've moved through the fear to the other side of it and can see things as they actually are. I had been afraid for years, I realized. Afraid of being difficult. Afraid of being the problem. Afraid that if I stopped giving, I would stop mattering. That night I understood something I should have seen much sooner. The giving had not made me matter to the people who treated me as though I didn't. It had only made it easier for them to take. Morning came the way it does in November in Illinois, gray and gradual, the light arriving without warmth but arriving nonetheless. I woke before the alarm and lay still for a few minutes, listening to the house. No dread, no bracing for something, just the ordinary sounds of early morning, the refrigerator cycling on, a car passing outside, a bird somewhere brief and unhurried. I made coffee and opened the kitchen window a crack. The cold air came in, smelling of wet leaves and distant chimneys. I sat with my cup and did not turn on the television or check my phone. I simply sat in my kitchen in the early quiet and let myself be exactly where I was. When I finally picked up my phone, there was a message from my granddaughter, sent at 7:14 in the morning. Good morning, Grandma. I just wanted to say I love you, and I'm proud of you. Yesterday was a lot, but you were really calm and really brave. I hope you know that. I read it twice. Something loosened in my chest that I hadn't fully noticed was tight. I typed back, Good morning, sweetheart. I love you more than I can tell you. Thank you for being who you are. Her reply came quickly, Are you going to be okay? I thought about the question seriously before I answered, the way she always deserved to be answered. I typed, I'm going to be better than okay. I think I'm going to be free. A moment later, she sent back a single heart, and I set the phone down and finished my coffee in the sunlight coming through the window, such as it was on a gray November morning in Illinois. Thin and cold and perfectly adequate. There were things still ahead. A full police investigation, conversations with the bank's legal department. Whatever came next between my daughter and her husband, which was their path to walk, not mine to carry. I did not know how any of it would end, but I had learned, finally at 67 years old, that not knowing how something ends does not mean you are not ready for it. I stood at the kitchen window for a little while after the coffee was done. The neighborhood was waking up around me, slow and ordinary. A neighbor walking his dog, someone backing out of a driveway. The world, unconcerned, continuing. For 35 years, I had been the person who steadied other people's emergencies. Children with scraped knees and high fevers. Parents who didn't know what to do. I had learned that the most important thing you could offer in a crisis was not solutions but steadiness. The calm presence that said, I'm here and we will figure this out. I had given that to everyone except myself. Standing there in my kitchen, in my house, in my life, I understood that it wasn't too late to start. I had spent years believing that love required me to make myself smaller so that other people could feel larger. I had confused endurance with devotion and silence with grace. I had let the taking continue because the giving had felt like the only way to stay connected. But a connection that requires you to disappear is not a connection. It is an arrangement, and arrangements can be renegotiated. I rinsed my cup, dried it, and placed it back in the cabinet where it belonged. Then I got my coat, my keys, and my folder, and I walked out into the cold morning air to begin the next part of my life. The door locked behind me with a sound I had heard 10,000 times. But this time, standing on my porch with my breath making small clouds in the November air, I felt it differently. Not the closing of something, the opening. You do not reclaim your life in one single moment. You reclaim it in the small, deliberate choice to stop pretending that things are fine when they are not, to stop absorbing what you should be naming, to stop making yourself easy to take from. At 67, I had finally learned what I should have known at 30, that your dignity is not something people steal from you. It is something you stop defending, slowly, quietly, one concession at a time. And the moment you decide to defend it again, it is already there, waiting, as solid as it ever was. I walked to my car and started the engine. The heater came on with a familiar hum. Down the street, my neighborhood went about its morning, and I went about mine.